Bring in the panel now to talk about all the things that have been happening around Australia this week and beyond. Bronwyn Bishop, former Speaker of the House of Representatives, Tina McQueen, Federal Vice President of the Liberal Party, and the great Bernie Finn, member of the Upper House in the Victorian Parliament, joins us. Good to see you, one and all. Look, I know that none of you are directly affected yet, but this massive, massive decision taken in a class action suit against the Queensland government about what happened in the flood of 2011 in Brisbane is going to impact, I think, on everybody's insurance premiums. Certainly the price of water is going to go up in Queensland and probably all around the country. This is a massive stuff-up of monumental proportions, according to the judgment, because people couldn't read their own instruction manual when it came to whether to let water out or not. They let it all out a bit late. I was a broadcaster doing live radio all through that whole summer period, and I remember it all incredibly well. Some stuff I won't say because there may well be an appeal, but you know, Bernie Finn, I get distressed when I find out that people can't even read instruction manuals on how to operate a dam. Then they open the dam gates, and people's lives are ruined, just ruined, just forever.
Indeed, taken in certain instances, and you know, we give people responsibility. Now, if they can't do the job, somebody's got to you know, pay the penalty for that. You know, that there are people with enormous responsibility in a whole range of areas as to how our lives are played out. And if they're not on top of their job, if they are unable to carry through the responsibility that they have, well then, you know, the whole system will just break down.
Yeah, it's awful. Look, Tina McQueen, the point is that we're hard on Westpac, and rightly so, for the wokeness, you know, being distracted by all the various woke balls that they've had in the air. Meanwhile, they've been caught out having broken 23 million times, say, a bunch of protocols they should have been right on top of. That whole board should go. The top management have already gone. I would imagine the same thing is true for people who run the water system in southeast Queensland at the very least. And maybe we should be looking back at ministerial advisors and others, because I think there's a long way to play out on this. Oh,
exactly, Gary. It's a total breach of their duty of care. Absolutely disgraceful. And like you say, we're all going to pay for it, and we've got to look closely. Heads do have to roll. There have to be consequences of action, or lack of action in this case. I mean, to not take advice of their own manual, to not understand it, is just, it's incredulous, absolutely incredulous.
Bronwyn Bishop, I don't think it's too tough to say $1 billion payout is what they're potentially looking at. Certainly hundreds of millions is the most conservative estimate. That means every consumer of water is going to pay for it in some way, shape or form. And we're all, as you know, connected in this market now.
Well, Gary, you know, you can't help asking yourself the question that the way that people are now totally discounted in the way water policy is carried out. If you look at the Murray-Darling Basin, you look at the release of waters from dams. I actually read a report by the Commonwealth environmental water holder, who is a person, and that person is the person who orders that the water be released. There is absolutely no consideration in the submission that she made to an inquiry that required consideration of human beings, farmers, at all. Now, this has become the pervasive policy. So when you've got those people who are going to release water from the dam in Queensland, once again, do you think that whole attitude is permeated through? Oh, it doesn't matter if we read the manual properly, people don't matter. I just think that we just have to reinstate the values that we have traditionally held, that human beings come first.
But Bronwyn, you know, it'd be a different story if there was an endangered frog that was in a bit of trouble. You know, they'd look at it closely then.
That's the point. As I said, in that submission that I read from the water holder, a suggestion that was made was that there should be roads constructed across areas that will be flooded. This is people's land they're talking about, so that you can still drive trucks and things across them. I mean, there's no consideration for human beings and people. So I mean, the fact that they didn't pay attention to their own manual is absolutely defenceless.
Gary, I was up in
it is, and
Gary, I was up in Mildura last week. Week, and you know, huge issue up there, the water, absolutely monumental issue, and the river up there, the Murray, it is looking absolutely magnificent. But there are farmers right throughout southern New South Wales, northern Victoria, can't get hold of the water. The water is just flowing through to some lake in South Australia or something. It's just an obscenity. You know, the water is there, it needs to be used. Let's give it to the farmers.
Well, Gary, I think...
Well, I think so. I think so. But in the case of this Brisbane flood in 2011, the water, the dam levels were low. We were off the back of the Millennium Drought. Everyone was nervous about releasing water. But the reality was you had a dam up near Toowoomba, which was only 40 kilometres away, that was connected by pipe, that they now pump water to. If they'd been pumping water up there, now I can say I do recall... Why aren't you pumping it up there, parking it into the dam in Toowoomba? Because if that dam filled up, for instance, and it did a few days later because of this horrendous flood that killed people in Toowoomba and the Lockyer Valley, that water could have flowed down into the Murray-Darling system, if you get what I mean. There was a release point. Instead, what happened was the Brisbane dams filled up. They reached, wait for it, over 200% capacity of the Wivenhoe Dam, because 100% of it is for water and 100% is for flood mitigation. So 200% capacity. They released the water. At the same time, all the water was coming down the Lockyer and the Bremer systems out of Toowoomba. And all these people around Ipswich, their houses were drowned. And yet they were promised that flood management was the #1 priority of that dam. So, look, we could talk about it all night. I know it's a national program. I don't want to, but there is going to be a consequence for everybody here.
Gary, where does the buck stop? Where does the buck stop with this? Who is ultimately responsible for this?
The Queensland government.
Well, the Queensland government is saying nothing much. The Queensland government is saying nothing much. The Anna Bligh government of the time, the minister at the time, all of these people are no longer in office. They're saying not much tonight, with the possibility of an appeal of this particular judgment that's come out today. And it was in New South Wales because class action suits until recent years were not possible to actually mount in Queensland, so it was heard in a New South Wales court, and a devastating outcome. It has national consequences. Watch this space. We're all going to feel the pain of this decision, and I want to know whether any bureaucrats are going to lose their job. That's my big question tonight. Meanwhile, in Canberra, Bronwyn, the parlour games are on. A crazy period, Christmas time. There are so many things that we could be doing. We could spend the whole night talking about Medivac. We could spend the whole night talking about Angus Taylor. We can talk about Pauline Hanson and giving the unions, you know, a leg up. But in reality, Parliament is kind of in a holding pattern, in my view, at the moment. We have no clear, really monumental agenda for 2020 that is being writ large and loud by the government at the moment.
Well, if I can just highlight the Medivac legislation and its repeal, you have to remember it's only there in place because the Labor Party voted for it.
Exactly right.
And excuse me, and that's very important to remember. So I think it is a very important piece of legislation because it is part and parcel of maintaining our borders. It is part and parcel of looking after the interests of Australia. And all this game playing that's going on with Jackie Lambie, I think the government's got to take a very strong stand on this one and put it in, and it's got to really work hard to get it through the Senate. With regard to
on a point
what's
of principle,
going on,
they've got to reintroduce it. Surely they've got to reintroduce it.
Yes,
surely.
they have. Yes, they have. And with regard to the other shenanigans that are going on there, with regard to Angus Taylor in particular, I think Scott Morrison's got a lot more problems than worrying about that particular issue. I said it's the way Mark Dreyfus carries on with referring every Tom, Dick and Harry in the Parliament off to the police. He's got real form, and thank goodness he's never likely to become Attorney General. But it is important for the government to get on the front foot. We should be out of Paris. We should start to really put into place policies that are going to give us power. We've got 13,000 people at the moment in Sydney who have no power and will not have any power before Sunday, and this is because of the windstorms that we had. But I would say get used to it, because if they continue to close down the coal-fired power stations, that's going to be the norm. So people are racing off to Bunnings and buying generators. It's just got to be dealt with, and it's no good pussyfooting around. It's got to be a firm policy.
Well, I think this is the point. We need some emphatic leadership here. I mean, Bernie, the point that I'm really angry about, and Bronwyn is right to point out that each of these problem bills that have stayed or been passed, put into law, have all come because Labor have played games. Now, Albanese needs to understand, Mr Albanese needs to understand that people have been affected by fires. People have been affected by drought. People, well, today, the monumental circumstance of this flood decision that's being made. So all of this is going on, and yet instead of dealing with the big nation-building stuff and giving the government clean air, he just wants to distract the government from doing the stuff that Australians want the government to do. Labor has something to answer for here, but Scott Morrison's got to take them on. Got to give them something to be embarrassed about.
He does. Look, you know, Scott Morrison had a great victory in May, but he's sort of breathed a sigh of relief, and as indeed we all breathe a giant sigh of relief. But we now have to govern. You know, he's got to get on. He's got to get the vision thing. He's got to sit back over Christmas and think, now, why did they vote for me last May? And he's got to put those reasons into effect. You know, and as Bronwyn said, you know, climate and all those issues, energy in particular. Here in Victoria, you know, last Thursday, we had a few hot hours of weather, a few hot hours. And half the western suburbs was blacked out, and then it started to spread across the rest of the metropolitan area. Now, what is going to happen if we actually get a full day of heat? What happens if we get 2 days of heat or 3 days of heat? God help us, you know, we'll just close the whole show down and pack up and leave. You know, it's pretty horrendous what's happening.
Gary, can I just...
The city of trams won't have a tram running. You're going to have load shedding on trams. That's what will happen.
Well, there'll be nothing running, nothing.
Yeah. Gary, I've just done a tour of the Central West. The week started with lightning striking a tree on my daughter's property, killed her lambs, burst into flames, just horrific. I then went to Dubbo. It is just, I can tell you, Prime Minister and Mr Albanese, no one is concerned about the bills, whether they go through or not, to be honest. People are struggling. I mean, every night I went out after touring these areas and just burst into tears, Gary. I mean, we can talk about it till the cows come home, but it is shocking. It is so dire, I can't tell you. So these are the things both the government and the opposition have to unite on and try and address these problems and fix it, or there's going to be nothing left of the bush. I can promise you. They are just so distraught and begging for a government to help.
Gary, what they need to do is to get the hell out of Canberra for a while and talk to real people.
That's what I did.
I think there's something in all of that, and Tina, you know, I want you to help my reputation amongst, you know, many friends that I have in the government ranks here, because I am a canary. I'm a canary in the coal mine here. I've just been to my old high school's, you know, 50th birthday party, McGregor State High School. I left early, but I was there, and people were coming up to me saying, "Love what you're doing with Sky and all this sort of stuff." My God. They're just not getting on with stuff. Now, they don't mean Scott Morrison, they don't mean Anthony Albanese, they just mean governments. Governments aren't getting on with stuff that makes sense. And it's not that people are stupid, people are just focused in on the bread and butter stuff. And when you start hearing that we've got 12 to 18 months to actually give our bush, our country producers some hope, or else we're going to start seeing industries just shutting up.
I don't think they've got 18 months.
That's what I'm hearing.
And I can tell you, you know, all credit to the Premier and her ministerial team that actually went to Bourke, Dubbo, did the tour as well. So I think they're going to be greatly enlightened. It needed to be done, and I think probably the Prime Minister and some ministers should do the same. It's absolutely heartbreaking. I mean, my daughter was very lucky, but let me tell you, I've got 2 grandsons now petrified of lightning, fire trucks, things they loved. Their little lambs gone. The most horrible death from lightning. It's just awful. And she's one of the lucky ones, Gary. That's the good news story I've got for you. It was just dreadful.
Well, it does, and it makes the children. Kids have to grow up so much quicker.
Yes.
Like the example just given. I have a young niece and her young family who are right out in the middle of New South Wales, where the drought has just been hideous, just red dirt. But there was one moment they did get some rain a little earlier on. But before the rain came, they were literally in the paddock, the two boys, praying for rain. And do you know the prayer they prayed? They told me that the prayer they prayed was, Lord, you said you help people who help themselves. We've been helping ourselves. Could you please help us now? And it rained the next day. But, yes, it filled the dams, but unless they get follow-up rain, it just doesn't help. But the thing is that these kids have had to grow up so quickly and have an adult attitude, because they see their farm animals having to be destroyed, shot. They see the hardship of the land, and we need what they produce. We just need what they produce.
And the sad thing is, even if we get rain now, there may not be stock left, Gary. You know, it's heartbreaking.
We've lost
Gary, what we have to realise...
Yes, Bernie. Yeah.
Gary, what we have to realise is drought is a part of this country. It happened to me when I was a kid on the farm, and I remember Dad digging holes and shooting the cattle and us burying them en masse. That is a part of Australia. We have to find ways to drought-proof this nation. And I know it won't be done in a 3-year term. It mightn't even be done in a couple of 3-year terms. But we have to have leadership. We have to have vision, you know, the vision thing. We have to have people who are prepared to make plans which go beyond the electoral cycle. If we can do that, well, then we can get the sort of results for people that we need. And you know, if we're going to worry about what somebody says about us in Parliament, or what the press gallery thinks or whatever, nobody's ever going to get anything done. You know, we really have to reach out and make decisions.
But there's a couple of other points.
We have to take a break, Bronwyn, because you know we're a commercial
we are
entity,
indeed.
and it's important that you know, we're not given $1.4 billion worth of subsidies to run.
Isn't that a disgrace?
Our programs. Yes, and they're not
privatise the bloody thing. That's what I say.
No one will buy it. They're not showing much warmth to the people who are doing it tough at the moment. Look,